An alleged plot to oust President Cyril Ramaphosa is dominating the news narrative this week. The ANC says a meeting between its current Secretary-General, Magashule, and its former President, Jacob Zuma, was not sanctioned by the party. Magashule has since admitted to meeting with Zuma, but denies the existence of any plot to unseat Ramaphosa. Let's unpack this and other developments in the political sphere. We're joined in studio now by political analyst Livhuwani Ndou. Good to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good morning to you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so let's just get off the mark by asking you, what did you read into the interview yesterday with Magashule?
Well, for me, I saw Magashule as a very defensive individual who actually wanted to justify why he actually had a meeting with former President Zuma and other former leaders of the ANC. But I think it's important to note that Magashule and Jacob Zuma have a very long relationship. They've been serving together, one being the president and the other being the chairperson of the ANC in the First State. So the relationship that exists between the two, it's a political relationship. Now it then means to me that whatever discussion that they would have, it will actually be political discussions.
Yeah.
But you know, beyond all this, you have one leader that has just been removed from office, from both the ANC and government, who also becomes part of that meeting. And one would then say that those that are suspicious about the meeting would also be correct, because if you look at the build-up towards Nasrec, these are the three individuals who were not in support of the current president, who is President Ramaphosa. So the theory around conspiracy might actually be informed by that. But another aspect that we need to look at is that the removal of Jacob Zuma from government and him having his term in the ANC having expired does not necessarily mean that he has now become enemies with other members of the ANC and leaders of the ANC, so they can regularly have discussions. But what is very, very important is that the meeting that took place over the weekend was not the meeting of the ANC, and that was the meeting of a group of people that are known to have been the supporters of Nkosazana Zuma.
Yeah. So, you know, when we sort of listened yesterday, and if we had to look at his body language, if we had to look at the way that he was getting a little bit defensive about certain things and also wouldn't elaborate on some things and explained most of it as one big coincidence, that the names that we've mentioned, whether it be Supra being there, Dudu Myeni being there, the perhaps future ANC Youth League president also being there, Thando Sabelo and Miocho Matuba, the ANC Women's League in the province. I mean, it just seems a little bit too coincidental, but he was just sort of brushing all of that off and saying, no, it wasn't organized, and you know, that's what we must believe. But must we believe that? Is it possible that there was a meeting, that there is a conspiracy happening behind the scenes, and particularly in KwaZulu-Natal?
The discussions on the conspiracy has been going on, especially in the public space. You'll recall that after Nasrec, there are certain individuals of the ANC who are saying that we are actually going to make sure that those who have actually won don't even enjoy staying in the ANC position for some time. And that will then raises the notion that indeed there might be a conspiracy going on. But also, if you look at the interview yesterday of the SG, you could actually see an individual who's quite very defensive, who is also not prepared, you know, to devise the details of what actually happened. And it is also true that this is not a public representative because he is actually in the party. But the ANC is the ruling party, and whatever actually happens anywhere that involves senior ANC officials, it has to be an issue of concern, especially to ordinary citizens. Because when the ANC is under threat, especially about divisions and disunity, it actually threatens the entire republic.
Well, it certainly does. And also, I suppose it's also communications. I mean, as soon as that article came out, and this was very much so discussed in the interview as well, the media release that was sent out by the ANC didn't it didn't clarify what was going on there. None of this was said. Firstly, Pule Mabe, the spokesperson for the ANC, comes out being very, very defensive, saying, I cannot confirm or deny this actually happened, even though there's a photograph that is showing that they were meeting. I mean, why can't they just come out and say, are two leaders or two friends not allowed to meet? Is that not a big deal? But we are being forced to have mind games playing and people speculating if they don't speak. And then, of course, it brings into this a little bit of confusion, saying, well, if you're not coming out and saying, we met, we spoke, this is very normal, we're all in the same political party, we're allowed to meet each other, but if you are denying it and saying it never happened, or maybe it did, but I'm not going to tell you, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that, of course, is a cause for concern.
Conspiracies in their own nature are sophisticated. And what then happens is that it becomes difficult, because when people are in a project of conspiracy, they'll actually ensure that certain individuals don't know what is happening, and they'll also ensure that there is a lot of myth surrounding the entire exercise. I also expected to hear the Secretary General saying that this is what I actually discussed with President Zuma. If there are this kind of fears within the ruling party, and I'm aware that a number of structures and members of the ANC and those outside the ANC are actually very much concerned that the unity that was being preached at Nasrec seemed to be falling apart. And you actually expect the person who runs the organization on a day-to-day basis to be able to assure South Africans and members of his party out there to say, this is the discussions that we had, and I want to ensure that all South Africans are actually made aware that the conspiracy issue that is not in existence. But also, there are a number of issues that have been reported in the media that were actually been denied before. The formation of a new party that actually made an announcement a few weeks ago. These are issues that were actually denied, but of great interest. When they made an announcement, they spoke about the unfair removal of President Zuma and Supra Maumapilo. And the same coincidence would then have the same people that are being mentioned in the new formation meeting with the leader of the ANC. There might be two issues. One is that the conspiracy issue should not be taken very lightly, because it's also possible. Or number two, maybe the Secretary General of the ANC was trying to convince the two leaders to distance themselves away from the new formation. But that will actually require the explanation of those that attended the meeting.
If we look at the article that came out, and let's give the Secretary General the benefit of the doubt, because what he was saying, and specifically yesterday, and we're going to be talking to Kate Skinner in the next hour, and we'll focus on journalism and the rights of journalists and also the ethics of journalists. Now, he was saying that he was never asked what was discussed in the meeting. He was just approached by some journalist who saw him and said, hey, what are you doing here? Why are you meeting? I'm from the Sunday Times. Or he didn't even ask questions. He said, I'm from the Sunday Times. And then Ace didn't have the right to reply. Was it fair for the Sunday Times to come out and publish an article saying that the meeting is a conspiracy, even though they may not, or they may know the contents of that meeting? I mean, let's talk about that.
There are a few other issues that we might not be aware that actually happened. Remember, there was some form of denials about that the meeting actually took place, until we got the picture that indeed the meeting took place. So there are few issues here. One will be that there might be a program to ensure that people don't know what actually happened in the meeting, or they might be waiting for the right time to explain what actually happened. But, journalists are supposed to be given their space when they're actually exercising their responsibilities. One of the critical areas of journalism is investigative journalism. And South African journalists have actually done extremely well in relation to investigative journalism. And we still have to get to the bottom of what actually transpired in that meeting. And I'm telling you, very soon we're actually going to know what actually happened and what the discussions were in that secret meeting.
Okay, so we'll We'll put that one on ice, because I think that there's more to come out of this story. It can't end here. There has to be more that we get out of this. Another big story to come out yesterday, of course, was President Cyril Ramaphosa saying that he will testify before the Commission of Inquiry for state capture if he's called to do this. Ramaphosa, of course, answering questions. This was in the National Assembly yesterday. Yet critics say when he was deputy president, when all of this was happening, he didn't stop it and he just allowed it to happen, even though he has constantly said he had no idea that it was running this deep. What do you think about our president's role in all of this?
The question, Leanne, would be, was state capture a program of the ANC, or was state capture a program of government? It was not a program of neither the ANC nor government. These are activities that were actually happening in secret. And obviously, there are a lot of other individuals that were prevented from knowing what is happening. And at the core of the discussions there is the influence of the Gupta family in terms of appointing senior government officials. And if you go to our constitution gives the powers to the president to appoint ministers and senior government officials. And that is why the president will say, I have actually taken a decision to appoint so and so and so. He would not say we, because he's aware that these are the powers given to him as an individual. So the possibility is that there could be people who didn't know what was happening in relation to state capture, and there would be individuals who knew that there are such kind of things that are actually happening. And that is why some of the ministers or senior government officials, even those in the ANC, those who were approached, some were able to come out and say, we've been approached by so and so, and we think this is not the right thing to do because we should have been approached by the president in relation to cabinet appointments.
Duduzane Zuma coming forward saying he's now flipped around and said, I will come and testify.
Remember, Leanne, there has always been the mentioning of Duduzane Zuma in a number of cabinet appointments.
All the time his name comes up.
When Ramaphosa resigned, he said he was called by Duduzane Zuma because they wanted to enter into another agreement. So obviously, there is a lot of information that would actually expect from Duduzane Zuma. But he would actually be in a very, very defensive side, because obviously he wouldn't love to see himself as having played a very, very significant role in actually compromising his father and the South African state. Yeah. So we're actually heading for a very, very huge circus.
A big one, and perhaps a circus via video link as well, because we've got the Guptas saying, yeah, they will, but they're not going to come here. They want to do it their way, and they want to do it via a video link. Is it fair?
Well, yes and no. They've got their own fears why they cannot come to South Africa. One of the brothers has been declared a fugitive, and as they say we don't have a trust in the NPA because we might actually get arrested. But if you are innocent, why then would you actually run away? So I think those are some of the issues that the Commission has to look at. But at the end of the day, South Africans deserve to know the truth of what actually happened with the state capture issue, and it's time for South Africans to move beyond the Commission and focus on real issues affecting South Africans.
Okay, there's one final question I have to ask you, and I know it's something that a lot of people are asking on Twitter. Why was Magashule, the SG yesterday, constantly referring to former President Jacob Zuma as President Jacob Zuma? Why do you think?
Well, I think A still has a lot of respect for President Zuma, for former President Zuma. They've worked together for a very, very long time. As I've indicated, whilst he was the chairperson of the ANC, and while former president was the president of the ANC in the country. But to some extent, some people will view it as a way of saying, I still recognize you as the president, even though there is a new president in place. And that creates a lot of confusion and mistrust on Magashule by a lot of citizens.
And I think that that's what a lot of people are asking as well, because that's a big question that's come up on Twitter after this interview. People wanting to know, and after the interview yesterday, is it that he still recognizes our former president, Jacob Zuma, as president and not President Ramaphosa, or is it just a sign of respect? Well, we'll leave that for speculation again. Okay, it's 7 o'clock here on the program, and that's a big thank you to Livhuwani Ndou unpacking for us some of the stories that are making headlines in the political sphere.